Hey everyone, it's Bob Pulver. Thanks for checking out another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. Today's show is an insightful conversation about humanity, creativity, and the evolving relationship between humans and artificial intelligence. I'm delighted to be joined by Adnan Iftekhar and Brian Moynihan, co-authors of the book AI Culture Shift: Frameworks to Elevate People and Transform Organizations, the focus of which, as you might imagine, is directly aligned to the AI readiness and human centricity themes of this show. Adnan brings a particularly diverse background, a global education perspective, and a highly creative mindset, while Brian blends business, information science, and Zen philosophy into his AI strategy work. Together, they've crafted a book and a process that models the very collaboration and innovation they advocate. We talk about their shared interests and values and how that sparked their new book in just 6 weeks, the importance of co-intelligence and emotional adaptability, and how education and organizations can better prepare for a more human-centric AI future. Thanks again for listening. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. With me today, I have the pleasure of speaking with two fine gentlemen who just wrote a very exciting book that I'm excited to dig into. Adnan Iftekhar and Brian Moynihan. Both of you are my distinguished guest for the day, and I appreciate your time. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing well. Thanks for inviting us. This is exciting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So Adnan, why don't you kick things off with just a brief introduction of your background, and then we'll go to Brian.
Sure. Adnan Iftekhar here. Grew up on 4 continents, born in Mauritius, a little island off the coast of Africa. Grew up in Pakistan and France, came to the US at age 18, seen education systems from all around the world, but really fell in love with Bennington College, which is where I went to school, because I came from Pakistan, which had not just grades, but ranks, and went into this space where there were no grades at Bennington. Because why limit yourself to an A? Why do, things the regular way when you can do them so much more intentionally for learning, for being present? And so I shifted my, thoughts from becoming a genetic engineer to really diving into education. And so after Bennington College, I took my path into thinking about schools and how to work in schools and make a difference. So I've taught biology, French, math, computer science, innovation, dance, yoga, acrobatics in schools, led technology teams and communications teams. And last few years, I worked at Google for a couple of years in Google for Education. And then after that, I started doing some work in consulting. And so I've been consulting with the government of Mongolia, the government of Pakistan, doing a lot of work out there, and now most recently doing some work in organizations, again internationally mostly, and in schools, K-12 schools in the U.S.
Oh my God. I thought I had a nonlinear career path. That is quite an adventure. Really, really interesting. Brian, how about you?
Hi, I'm Brian Moynihan. I am an AI strategy consultant, but my background is similarly sort of going from one thing to the next. I have master's degrees in 3 areas: in business, in information science, and in Zen Buddhism. And so I kind of bring those three aspects to my work. So thinking about the business side of things, technology and emerging technology, how we can use those, but also from my Zen side. A few things. One, focusing on values and on people and trying to understand the human side of things. And so I think that's been an important part of our work together, and sort of, I think for both Adnan and I, we have this strong humanist aspect to the things we do with AI. And that's when we wrote AI Culture Shift. And then some other things that we've been working on together as well that are around that, thinking about mission, thinking about AI governance in an organization, how that comes together, thinking about the role of the chief AI officer, who really is thinking across an organization, thinking about strategy and operations and tactics, yes, but also the human side of that and how it all comes together.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating. I think that, well, first of all, we do have a lot in common, even though we've never crossed paths before. I guess it was a couple of weeks ago when through Content Evolution and then our mutual friend Kevin Clark. But it's really interesting to hear about other sort of generalist. I don't know if you guys consider yourself generalists. I mean, it seems like that's kind of the path that you've been on because you've done so many different things. Um, and it seems like we're all innovation, what I call innovation catalysts or innovation strategists as well. So really interesting to meet other sort of like-minded folks who, as you were pointing out, Brian, we think about like AI governance and some of the more rigid or structured sort of domains within organizations, balancing that with some of the innovation and experimentation kinds of pursuits, which I know we'll get into how we all balance that as we get through the course of this discussion. So so the book, I mean, I know you haven't known each other that long, and so I'm curious about the impetus for the book, and there you go, the impetus for writing AI Culture Shift together, and how you quickly not only formed a bond just in terms of being sort of colleagues, but how you quickly got this together and got on the same page, literally and figuratively, to write this book.
For me, uh, it was like, like, and I'll just sum it up as like, I just met a brother of mine, right? Like, I just feel really like instantly I felt really close to Brian, who, sometimes an evil twin, but sometimes,
Devil's
uh,
advocate, yeah.
you know, yeah, yeah, like mostly an advocate, but it's good to have that tension, and I want to come back to that tension in a little bit. But how we met was through Kyle Shannon. So Mark Prensky is a friend of mine, and he was attending, weekly office hours with Kyle Shannon, and he invited me to join. And this is kind of like where I met Brian, and we, I was introducing myself. Brian reached out and said, I think we have a lot of things to talk about. Let's connect," and we connected. So LinkedIn kind of brought us together as well. And as soon as we connected, we just realized one of the things that we had in common was that we had both been wanting to write a book for like ages. And I was like, well, let's do it. And Brian was like, yes, let's do it. And I don't know which one of us said it first, but we were just like on the same page. And literally, it was, and Brian has an affinity with the number four. And we started writing the book on 11/11, which is four. So November 11th, and it was, I mean, to me that no, that signifies a lot more than just that as well, because it's Singles Day in China, and there's a lot of connotations around 11/11, and numerologically I think it makes a lot of sense. And I have an affinity with the number four as well, and we can, if we want to get down that path, we can go there too. But the point of that really was like we met every single day. We met every day for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and we birthed the book literally by talking it out loud. And we started experimenting with different types of note takers, and seeing which one worked, which one was better, which one was worse, how it all like came together. But really, it was around like giving us the freedom to talk and not have to take notes. So I would be on a bike, on the Peloton riding. Brian would be on a walk, and we'd be talking, and we didn't have the limitation that we put on ourselves, or at least I'll speak for myself. I didn't have that limitation of like taking notes. And I think Brian still takes notes because that's how he thinks, but I'll let him talk about that. But for me, it was just like, I can do this from anywhere. I can do this while riding a bike. I can do, like, so it just kind of opened up a space for me that I didn't realize that existed before, that allowed me to really be focused and present and available. And yeah, and I'll stop there and let Brian fill in some
Yeah,
details.
absolutely. So we had met and then set this intention of writing a book together. And then Adnan said, "Well, I'm going to speak at the largest tech conference in Pakistan coming up in January." And we had met in November. He said, "Let's have it done by then so we can do that." And we're like, "Great, it's on." And so we'd met as you mentioned every day, and then really put a focus around that. And it was fantastic to use that conversation, as Adnan had said, and really, I love the concept of conversation, both talking to great people such as yourselves, but also with AI. I mean, we've come to the point of vibe coding and various other things that people are doing, where it's a conversational interface. So we could draw from that conversation, and for me, that was a little bit of what was missing in my ability to deliver a book previously, was just thinking about how you have the creative side and all these these ideas, but then how do you structure them? And so AI taking the transcripts of our conversations was able to say, kind of like summarize what we did, and help us think through chapter outlines and building that out. So it was really our original ideas, a couple of models that we had been carrying with us, sort of applied to AI and the things that we had sort of fused together through those conversations. And then iterating over every aspect of that, and thinking, this works, that doesn't work. We're going to toss this chapter out. We're going to add things in about AI governance, about the CIO. We interviewed a bunch of experts and brought all their points of view in. And so really it was a mosaic, I think, of Adnan and of me, of the people we interviewed, and a bunch of different AI tools, sort of all iterating through to create the book. And we actually have a page in the book that says how we created this book. And we hope that others will follow that as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. It also brings up one of the topics that Kevin Clark and I have in common. I guess probably Kyle Shannon too. The concept of collective intelligence, right? And how do you aggregate that effectively? And what role does AI play in the aggregation of the collective intelligence of its own sort of intelligence, or the intelligence that it's sort of simulating, um, and how do all those pieces fit together? So obviously everything we're talking about is around like human and AI collaboration, and it sounds like this is case in point is the book as a result of one of those sort of experiments.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting to the point where you could pretty much say a sentence and say, "Write me a book," and it'll do it.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
not what we did. And so if there's an extreme on one side where it's like the AI did practically everything, and then on the other side, which is the humans did everything, we were definitely towards the middle. There was a lot of human effort and intelligence at every stage of it, including just, I mean, in thinking about the strategy and the prompt and the process that we followed, because multiple people could come into with the same basic question, and came out with completely different results. And that's a result of your strategy going in, your taste of what you select, it's what you add to it. Oftentimes I would realize I was like, thinking about a chapter outline and having ChatGPT help me think of what might be in that chapter, and then realize I hadn't supplied enough information. So then I went back and recorded again and added a transcript and had that feedback into it. And so it was definitely an iterative process. But the collective intelligence idea, I think that's a really good way of saying it, and not everyone thinks that way. I love that Kevin and Kyle do, to say essentially what we're doing is tapping into the intelligence of all the things that this has been trained on. Um, and that is pretty remarkable to be able to have that. And then this new role becomes someone who's the orchestrator, the manager, the person who's
Yeah.
bringing it all together.
Well, I also think it's important to think about where do we draw the line about AI's role in a creative process in storytelling, whether that's um, for independent folks who want to write a book, whether it's for current workforce or maybe a job candidate and who's interviewing and filling out um, assessments, right? And should AI be able to help you? And then, of course, for the future workforce, um, when is it appropriate to use AI over the course of your studies or applying to college and things like that? So I know we'll get into that a little bit later. Um, but so the book's been out for a little bit, and it seems to be doing quite well. I'm curious, the reactions that you're getting so far, from target audience or maybe some unexpected audiences. Any feedback you received so far?
I think we've had some really incredible feedback, and I'm really thankful, grateful, and I also want to mention that it was a community effort. Like, we talk about co-intelligence. Not only was it that, I mean, Cindy Kuhn, who works with Kevin Clark, was instrumental in kind of bringing some of this together to publish it, right? Because it's published through Content Evolution Media, and having not having had that support, I don't think we would have been able to do it in this amount of time that we had it ready. And we were able to bring, so it was published on December 23rd, and we were able to bring our we had a copy in hand before the end of the year. So in 2024 we were published authors with copy in hand, which felt really
It
amazing.
was like 7 weeks end to end or something.
That's
Yeah, it was
crazy.
pretty remarkable. Um, and Yeah, I think that it was a pretty remarkable process. But sorry, and I know we were going to say something else.
Yeah, and I mean, even so Brian and I met for the first time in Lahore in Pakistan in January of 2025, and it was just a wild ride over there. We met all of these amazing, incredible people. The day that I met Brian at 4 in the morning, he just got in. And I said, okay, we've been invited to go speak. And you don't have to go if you don't want to, because you just arrived. We've been invited to go speak at this university 5 hours from now. Do you want to go? And Brian's like, yes. And that
Let's do
attitude
it.
of yes, of like, like being on this adventure and doing all of these things, like brought us to a place where we were just embraced in so many different ways. So launching the book in Pakistan and then being able to talk about it a few weeks later in Saudi Arabia, where we ended up meeting the CIO of NASA and some other incredible folks at the LEAP conference, and being able to hand them the book and being like, and some of them saying, this is the book that we need right now, was really validation in so many different ways, but more so when, some folks that I really trust read the entire book and told me this is reads really well. This is impactful. And I think because the message, as Brian was talking about, was really around humanity, right? It's a book about humanity more so than a book about AI, and the collective intelligence, the co-intelligence, the intelligences that arrive to a space that can be individualized. And to your point, Bob, that I was thinking about this is that the creative process in my mind is really individual, right? So it's going to vary from person to person to person, not necessarily even from discipline to discipline. And I have more to say on that, but like you said, we're going to put a pin on that. Um, but we've gotten some really, like great reviews. Currently we have 17 5-star reviews on Amazon. We made it into the top 10 in a number of categories. We hit number one in sociology, in tech aspects of the, social aspects of the internet. And
Hi, I'm Stephen Rothberg.
And I'm Jeanette Leeds.
And together, we're the co-hosts of the High Volume Hiring Podcast.
Are you involved in hiring dozens or even hundreds of employees a year? If so, you know that the typical sourcing tools, tactics, and strategies, they just don't scale.
Yeah, our bi-weekly podcast features news, tips, case studies, and interviews with the world's leading experts about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to high volume hiring.
Make sure to subscribe today.
Organizational change. Yeah, computers and tech. We were number two in that category. So top 500 in Kindle.
Yeah, exactly. So that was one of the surprising things for us, is to be number one in a number of these categories that were bestseller in Kindle and specific categories like organizational change, which was amazing. And then, but I think to Anand's point, people are seeing that this is a problem. That AI is at a place where clearly it's changing everything, and it's changing industries, it's changing jobs, it's changing the way people think about themselves, and people are a little overwhelmed by it. Leadership, I think, doesn't always know in organizations and large companies what exactly to do with it. But there's the human side of it, which we're not hearing as much about. So I think that we had both come from this background where we'd spent a lot of time thinking about the socio-technical aspects of this. I've been leading innovation communities, first around digital health and all the ways wearables and other devices could be used around healthcare, around virtual reality and augmented reality and the whole spatial computing world. And so I did that within UNC Chapel Hill, great university, and then also outside of it and in the area, in the Raleigh-Durham area where I live. And so thinking about that human side of things is something we both brought, and Adnan also has brought this from his whole life before as well. And so we were kind of in a good position to think about the solution to this problem. And I think that's what really hit it off for us and helped us move forward. And one more thing about the message is we're hearing, like, for instance, I've shared it with some people and they're like, this is a great book. But I could tell that they didn't get all the way through it because they're not a book reader. So one of the things we're thinking about is how do we simplify some of this message, or how do we have it in an audio format that's coming soon. So we do now have paperback and Kindle, we have a hardcover, and the next thing will be audio. And then with other books that we're thinking about, how do we get this message across in very simple ways? I've been taken by this idea of a parable, kind of a business parable. So we're working towards that.
Yeah, I love the sort of forethought you're putting into that, because I think it ties into the human centric sort of nature of of the message itself, right? And that AI literacy is a huge challenge, and I struggle sometimes with the literacy piece because people think it means how can I learn to prompt better, but literacy and AI readiness for this sort of AI powered, but hopefully human centric, future is much more than just what I might type into, a rich text box on my screen, or even using voice, which we know is going to be a pretty dominant way to sort of communicate with some of these AI tools. But I really like the approach, and I think just to get into some of the themes here, I was hoping you guys could unpack some of the intelligences that you were talking about, Adnan, in terms of obviously you've got IQ is a factor, but when we talk about what makes us human, it's not just our actual sort of core intelligence, but it's emotional intelligence, our adaptability, and things of that nature that are going to really make us take a more holistic view of how is AI impacting not just me and what in my potential and my effectiveness and my productivity, but that of my team, that of my organization, or that of some other community that I might be a part of, because it is going to impact all of us. But we can't just focus on individual effectiveness and productivity, because even sort of independent folks like us do collaborate and work with others, right?
And I do have to say this too. Yes, 100%. So this book would not have been possible without Brian. This book would not have been possible without me, without Cindy, without Kyle Shannon, without Mark Prensky, right? Like there's humans that are definitely involved in bringing Brian and I together. And then actually the actual fact of publishing the book, but also like it wouldn't have been possible without AI. So the human element, the AI element, the technological element as well, and the impetus of accountability. All of these things led to this happening, and and I kind of explained the IQ, EQ, AQ framework in the way that it all figured itself out for us. Because so yes, when you talk about IQ, it's about intelligence, but for me, it's more about information, right? Because IQ tests in the past have been incredibly racist and have a history that's fraught with a variety of biases, and bias is another thing to really look at too in all of this. So I really try to think about it more around information. Bob, you have information. I, Adnan, have information. Brian has information. Collectively, the three of us have information. We come together and chat about these things, but AI has access to a lot more information than we do at any time, right? And not only that, but it can organize it usually much better than humans. At the same time, AI will hallucinate, right? That's been one of the biggest things that people are like, oh my gosh, I can't trust AI. AI hallucinates. I'm like, well, why are you talking to me? I could be lying to you right now, right? AI hallucinates, humans lie. AI is trained on human data, and human data is biased, right? So there's no way that AI cannot be biased. And at the same time, it can also start to overlook its bias. And that's a whole other conversation that we can start to have too in that regard. So IQ is really around that informational awareness. And as you were talking about AI literacy, it's understanding why AI hallucinates and understanding why humans lie is really, I think, around that literacy piece. And then going into the EQ, the emotion side of things, is that AI currently does not feel anything, but we do, right? So taking that not as a disadvantage, but as an advantage to use to be like, what do I want this product or this idea to evoke? What kind of emotion? And really thinking about the impact that it's going to have and how we're going to be able to learn more about ourselves, right, in doing anything. And I feel strongly about the creative process, about being able to create something, make something. So thinking about knowing who you are, what your strengths are, and how to use those strengths to put something out into the world that's going to have a meaningful impact. So really focusing on those ideas around the emotional aspect. And then the action aspect or the adaptive aspect or the agility is really around taking all of these ideas and putting it into practice. Like I can tell you right now that it took me 4 hours to create an app that ended up being in the top 10 for an NVIDIA developer, contest in the world. And you will not understand it until you've done it yourself. You've taken those 4 hours or 15 hours or however long it takes you, because the first time I did it took me 4 days, but the 12th time I did it took me 4 hours to create an app that I was able to do this with. But until somebody had that experience, it's not going to make sense to them. So taking action, understanding that and putting it into play is the same thing. And the same thing with this book. After we wrote this book, we're like, so just to put it into context, it took, I think, collectively 250 hours for us to put this book together. If we'd done it individually or like without AI, I calculated it would have taken us about 4,000 hours, right? So we were able to accelerate the process to go from a 6-month span to a 6-week span, right? And so for that, to me, is doable in this stage of my life, right? And I'm able, but until I took action and did it, I didn't know that was possible for me.
It's funny when it talks about the 4 hours, because we've had some conversations with others where 4 hours is kind of this magic number. If you set aside 4 hours with some lofty goal and some AI, you could do amazing things. You could create a website. You could, get a huge, chunk of a first draft of anything you're trying to do in your life done. It's amazing. And as Adnan was talking, I'm thinking about the AQ, IQ, EQ framework. And then for instance, I just read something, Adnan will often say, humans lie and AI hallucinates. I was just reading something recently that Anthropic put out about their reasoning, and this is actually true of humans as well. Somebody will do something, and you ask them a question, "Why did you do that?" And they're like justifying in their head, coming up with reasons that were maybe not really their original emotional take on it. And that's what AI is doing as well. But this concept of
This is the microscope paper that Anthropic just put out.
I'm not sure if it was the Microsoft. I'm not sure the exact one, but and then
they just put out a microscope. I think it's called the microscope. I forget the full name of it, but it's basically, let's go under the covers, and let's see not just the one of the chat GPT models now shows you its sort of reasoning, but this is going through, like you're describing, Brian, almost transparently seeing the sort of mock thought process of the logic as it goes through it.
Yeah, and they would even seed it, like give it clues, and they were comparing Anthropic's Claude to DeepSeek and saying like, what percentage of the time, if we give it the answer and tell you, by the way, you got this from sources you shouldn't have got it from, you might not. Yeah, does it sort of reveal its answer or use it in some way? But the emotions around it, I think, in an organization, there's a lot of emotion around AI. People are like worried about losing their jobs and various different things. And so if you can't align the people in your organization, then that's problematic. I think the first thing you do is you open the conversation to people so they can understand. You frame it in such a way so it doesn't get out of hand, and then you start aligning people towards moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have seen this. I'm curious if the organizations and leaders that you've talked to acknowledge this, but I haven't seen or heard very many companies that have actually put in like a required module around AI literacy, the same way we now have one around data privacy, workplace, the onboarding sort of modules in the annual sort of compliance training that you would get for cybersecurity or whatever, because some of this comes down to an understanding. You don't have to be a cybersecurity expert to know that you shouldn't click on a email that looks suspicious and things like that. So in some ways, there's a component of AI literacy that does hit on the governance and the risk, and trying to essentially mitigate the potential sort of weak link, because anyone could just be, if you're a recruiter and you just upload some job description to source candidates for and now you've sent like a confidential something up to the mothership, as it were, to go back into the training set, that could come back to bite you, right? So some of this is around when should I use it, when should I not use it, and there's obviously in the education sector there's those that scenario as well. When should I use it? When is it not appropriate to use it? And when should I trust it? So it's interesting that Adnan, you describe it as hallucinations versus humans lying. While those things are true, I think of hallucination as like like your know-it-all friend who just has to have an answer for everything, even though they don't really know what they're talking about. And you have to know, you have to know that. You have to know that they're full of shit.
Yeah. And they will lie, and they will lie, and they will lie, right?
They will, but but it just, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but like sometimes people sort of, they may fill in the blanks, so they might think it's like not necessarily lying, but like they might consider it an educated guess if you
Right.
called them out on it or something, right?
This
So
is about probabilities, right? So if something has a high enough probability,
yeah,
you're gonna call it. And I saw an example where
yeah,
it was like, versus is Michael Jordan versus some, literally made up basketball player, and you ask a question about them. It's so familiar with Michael Jordan in the data set that it feels more confident about saying something there, and so it's actually more likely to hallucinate about like a famous person than it is because it's like, well, I don't have a lot of confidence there. So yeah.
you know what's interesting about that, Brian, is one of my points of reference with the hallucination concept from the beginning is one of the one of my favorite jobs at IBM was when IBM Watson was coming out of the labs. It wasn't even called Watson yet. It was called question answering. And but when they announced that they were going to do Jeopardy, I had the mock Jeopardy studio was in my office.
Okay.
I worked at this like research lab connecting clients to research. So not forget about what we're selling, off the truck, so to speak. This is what's coming, and this is what you should pay attention to over the next, couple years. And so one of the interesting things about the Jeopardy scenario is that it had to have a certain threshold of competence
Right, right.
in the answer, and if it didn't reach that threshold, it would not buzz in. So when ChatGPT came out and I started hearing about all these hallucinations, I'm like, where's there's no threshold, there's no line. It will just answer. It'll just answer.
Right, right.
Yeah. So if you're so to the uneducated, if you ask a question about subject matter that you're clueless about, you're more likely to trust. Well, that sounds right. It sounds plausible. It sounds accurate, and you go with it, right? But that's part of learning how to trust it, because I've been in scenarios where I ask it things where I know enough about what I'm asking and the context and things like that. And so I'm able to detect in those cases, as most of us should be, that doesn't sound right, or that can't be right. I've said, "Oh, give me more information about this startup," and it'll completely make up a story about this startup. I'm like, I know for a fact that is not true.
Right.
Tell me where you got that information, and it'll say, well, you know, um, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. Like I shouldn't have done that. That goes against my programming.
That second answer was not, as I was talking about before, is not necessarily tied to the first answer. It's just a justification for an answer that was already given. But so there's a lot of aspects of it. There's what's in the training set and such. There's the hallucination. You can also increasingly what people are doing to do about this. First of all, the frontier models are just getting better at hallucinations in general, and it's showing their sources. But in addition to that, we're also getting guardrails that people put up in various different ways to make sure that it's accurate and ethical, that it's aligned to a company and what they're trying to do. And there's some approaches that can take, here's the like an RAG model. Retrieval augmented generation is where you add in your own files so you can sort of fine tune the model based on that. So in that sort of model, you could say, here was the original, say, documentation for a company. Here was the answer that it gave, and then take that and check it back. So there's a number of sort of tools that are sort of being built around the LLMs to take advantage of what they're good at, but also to sort of hold in some of those hallucinations. But a lot of it too is the utility function. When you program something, you say, what's the goal? And the goal has been please the human. And humans are pleased when you give them an answer that sounds good to them. And so the goal was not be as accurate as possible. So that was also sort of built in. But you could build an AI and other people are doing that in different contexts. Yeah.
And this is where the human intelligence on top of the artificial intelligence is important, right? To be able to discern what sounds right versus what is right, and to be able to check those sources and figure out if this is actually making sense or not. Or what I've done a lot of times is I'll take something that's been given to me and I'll put it in Perplexity or another LLM, right? And be like, okay, fact check this for me, right? So use the LLMs against each other, or with each other, whichever way you want to do it, just to be able to fact check it. Give it another layer of verification before you move forward with trusting the things. And especially right now, seeing all the different things that are coming on social media these days. There's a lot out there that needs fact checking, and I don't trust the social media companies to do that for me at all.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things, and you guys have already seemingly done this for the book, and I'm guessing you'll have other books that you'll work on together and other projects. But as the more you can customize the sort of training set and the corpus of information that it's trained on, I think the hallucinations just naturally, sort of decrease, right? Because you've got a constrained environment. It's not just out there being trained on the nonsense that is the internet as it's evolved over the last 20 years, but you've got more trusted data. Hopefully companies have some level of data and analytics maturity. Otherwise the AI is going to be fed junk food, as it were.
Quick example, just yesterday I uploaded a PDF that was not like the OCR wasn't working, and so ChatGPT had to do the OCR to kind of figure out what was in it, but it wasn't able to do it properly because it was over 100 pages. And so it invented what was in that and tried to figure out what was there from the little OCR it did try to do in it. And it invented something from a different chat of mine, because now all the different chats are kind of like related and it has that in its memory. So it took something from a totally different chat and told me, this is what's in the PDF. I said, no, you're wrong. Try again. And then it gave me something from a different chat. And I said, you're still wrong. This is what it is. And I kind of gave an explanation. It says, well, I can't fully read the document, but from what I can ascertain is this. And so even after multiple levels of prompting, it still wasn't able to give me the answer. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to have to read it myself.
Yeah, and Ethan Mollick calls that the jagged frontier. That an AI, there's some things it's really good at, some things it's really not good at, and then you kind of don't know until you test. And then those lines are changing all the time; things are shifting. And so that jagged frontier is, I think, a useful thing to think about, because yes, make sure you're verifying what you're doing. So my example was, I took a newspaper article on one photo, and I said, "Can you just tell me the text that's in this photo?" And the first paragraph, it looked pretty good. The text was very clear, and then completely made up plausible but completely inaccurate things that were in this news article, and it was still different length and stuff. And so if I wasn't paying attention, I would just think that was the answer because it looked pretty good.
We've still got a long way to go to improve, reduce the hallucinations and make these things more trustworthy. But at the same time, things are moving fast, and so the quicker we can get folks in there and experimenting, to your point, Adnan, I think it is important that people get experience this for themselves. I mean, these are not things you just sort of learn in a classroom setting. You've got to learn by doing. I know people have different learning styles, but this is one example where you can't fully appreciate the pros and cons of this, and I guess elevate your skepticism detector and really think about applying your critical thinking and not just taking its responses at face value. But it's also important, and not just through a conversational interface. I mean, if it's automating things in a workflow, you need to be able to trust that it has all the context, it knows how to interpret information when there is some ambiguity. And so I think this gives people pause and gives perhaps organizations pause as well. But I also feel like we're past the early adoption phase to a degree. I mean, it's still very early days, of course. So maybe we're, I don't know, bottom of the first innings, top of the second inning. I don't know, but we are entering that sort of. I just saw a white paper the other day that said we're sort of generative AI is entering this sort of trough of disillusionment, as Gartner would call it. And but that means now's the time, right, to jump in. And so I think your book is very timely, on top of important and informative, for the, I won't necessarily call them laggards, but the people who are trying to be maybe fast followers and realize, people are taking advantage of a lot of these tools, and it's affecting my competitive, positioning as an organization. It's affecting the effectiveness of my team, and I've got to really rethink how work is being designed, how roles are scoped, and the skills and competencies that I need going forward. Because the skills that I was looking for, even a year or two ago, are not the same skills that are going to get me to where I need to be.
Yeah, I think this is the need for the chief AI officer. Which is to say that the organizations need to think on multiple levels. So you're thinking on the tactical level, an individual being trained on AI literacy so they can prompt and think about safety. There's a lot more to that because, of course, people who know how to prompt. Just because you have Photoshop on your computer doesn't mean you're an expert in how to manipulate photos, right? And so, similar thing I think with this, that in some ways, because we're past and many people have used it one time, may have limited views about how it can be used. We're hearing this about questions about critical thinking, for instance, and say, oh yeah, it undermines critical thinking. But AI, because of your prompt, could just say, disagree with everything I say with a cogent argument why it's something else is true, right? I mean, you could very, very easily think of those if you think of in the AI mindset. But that's just the sort of tactical elements. There's also the operational ones, as you mentioned, when you're having workflows coming through. There's also the strategic aspect where you're thinking about the big picture of your company and where it fits in the strategic landscape, and how you might sort of realign your organization of focusing on your core mission and outsourcing other elements, working with partners. And then the human element, which comes across all of these things. So definitely, I think, and that's why I think this chief AI officer role is necessary, because you need somebody who's thinking across those elements and understands the technology and understands the organization in a particularly customized way, and then thinking from that human standpoint. But sorry, Adnan, you were saying something.
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, and I think part of it is also like, we're talking about skill set. And I think more than that, Brian, you mentioned the mindset and also the heart set, right? Like, what is the intention that you're going into this with, right? Like, what is it that you want to get out of this? Why are you doing this? Where are you coming from? Again, talking about the mission in that respect. And the skill set will develop as you do the thing, right? Rather than when you talk about the thing. And in all of this, like coming back to accountability, right? And this is why coaching is so effective. This is why working with humans is so effective, because if you're only accountable to yourself, then that's a very small percent of the population that's actually going to achieve something. That's actually going to create something and do something, because being accountable just to yourself is really hard. But having an accountability partner like I had Brian in all of this really helped me to kind of get to the finish line, to actually produce something, to create something, to make something that is hopefully having an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you guys, since you both spend a lot of time in the education sector, just how you see AIs affecting, I guess, both students and learning, but also from a faculty and teaching standpoint, how AI is being adopted in schools. So I know you guys focus on different areas. So maybe Adnan, your perspective for K-12, and then we'll do Brian for higher ed.
There's a lot to unpack here, and I think thinking about intention is incredibly important. Thinking about AI governance is incredibly important. I think the role of teaching, learning is changing incredibly rapidly. I like to think about it in terms of health as well right now, which is Dr. Peter Attia wrote this book called Outlive, where he talks about the difference between lifespan and health span. So lifespan, if you live to be 90, if your lifespan is 90, but your health span is 80, the last 10 years of your life, you will live in misery. And the difference between medicine 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. 2.0 is where we're at, which really extends your lifespan, but not your health span. And moving to 3.0, which is individualized healthcare, is what's going to bring us to the next space of increasing your health span. And I go one step further to increasing your thrive span. How much are you thriving in your life? And this is the same thing that I think education needs to move to, from being like, one size fits all, right? Which is where we're at right now. Like, okay, we have standards. At this grade level, you do this. At this grade level, you do this. But as every educator knows, every child is individual and will learn things at a different rate and speed in different areas. And it needs to individualized. It needs to be individualized. And the only way to do that is to use AI effectively and intentionally in the classroom to really find the guardrails. So innovate safely to create spaces where not only educators can start to evolve their own thinking and their own methodology, but also students. AI is not going away anywhere. So unless you're using it in a way, in a safe manner for yourself, with yourself, to kind of see what the boundaries are, um, you need. I think educators need to play. Students need to play as well. Again, in a confined, in a guardrailed environment, and that is not happening. I don't really see that happening much anywhere. I do have to mention Rehan School. Rehan Allahwala created the first AI school in the world in Karachi in Pakistan 2.5 years ago, and it's all focused on creating, making, and being intentional with what you're creating and making and putting out into the world. And I think his students are doing some incredible work. But yeah, I think that there's a lot more that can be done and that should be done. And once that starts to happen, I think then we'll really see how this evolution will take us into the space where students can really be centered. And they're not being centered right now. We're just recreating the old model over and over again. Every single edtech app out there is about making things faster in the old way. So you're running to the same place that you were running before. You're just getting there faster. You're just being more standard, quicker.
When I think about higher education, people are often thinking about teaching and learning, but there's a lot else that goes on in a university setting. So, for instance, there's research, there's the practical aspects of what they do. For instance, clinical care, if they've got a medical school, other professional schools of various kinds where they're creating things. So you're thinking about students, you're thinking about faculty, you're thinking about the staff members, you're thinking about the buildings that they're supporting. There's a lot of things that go on in an institution. But just focusing on more the teaching and learning side of things.
Hello, this is Michael Vandervoort from the Drive-Thru HR podcast, where we discuss ideas, trends, and activities that impact HR, talent, HR technology in the workplace. Our focus is on expanding knowledge and igniting curiosity as we hear directly from people who are shaping the future of the HR industry. Join us.
So recently, Anthropic came out with a offering for higher education that is based on being basically a good tutor. So if somebody asks a question, a student can go in there and then, rather than giving the answer, it sort of walks them through the process of that. ChatGPT, to taking a different approach, they just released free through May for all college students in the United States and Canada to be able to use ChatGPT with the pro features. So they're trying to get in there and get the next generation of users to start thinking in that tool, so that they want to continue it into the future. And their focus, rather than that tutor mode, is really more on the productivity side. And we'll see Google is doing things with Gemini, really interesting things with Notebook LM, which can take your own files and really, not hallucinate and stick to your files as much as possible, but also create mind maps and create executive summaries and create podcasts that simplify whatever you put in, that have been remarkable. Microsoft is doing things with Copilot. Of course, they're tied to OpenAI, but they have a lot of schools are Microsoft schools, so that makes sense for them that they could tie into the existing tools that they're using. We heard recently that California schools say AI is okay to use for brainstorming and for editing, but not for writing. So making that distinction. And I've heard things that oftentimes when I talk to faculty about this, I'll say something like, for your first assignment, you might say, I want you to write this and you cannot use AI. Now, for your second assignment, I want you to write this and you must use AI. So that's sort of like giving them both sides of it so they kind of understand and they're gaining the literacy and getting the skills that they need. And I think that sort of balanced approach is a good one. And other people are saying you can increase what you expect from students. So it's like, yeah, this should be, read perfectly well and cogently because you have an AI editing tool to help you out with this. You can give us a presentation. Maybe you build a website or an app for this. In addition, in the same amount of time that someone might have written a paper before, you just kind of up the stakes. So there's a number of different ways, but I think that by and large, people aren't ready. that especially faculty are not sure what to do and how to realign around this. So there's been a lot of discussion back and forth about, what still works, what doesn't work. Can you use the honor code? Can we make this more presentation style? Are there different elements that bring out that human element? But we shouldn't pretend it doesn't exist. We should definitely use it as a tool.
Yeah, I see. I've heard similar feedback about the teachers. Just thinking about high school where my daughter is. Like teachers need to get comfortable before they can teach the students well. Like we don't have to necessarily wait for that as it relates to their core curriculum. There's other things that we can do to get parents comfortable, so the parents know that kids are accessing AI tools and being aware of what they're using it for exactly, as you pointed out, maybe editing and brainstorming, but not in the actual writing portion of the tasks that they have assigned to them. And then in higher ed, I think it's we're preparing them. Well, we should be preparing them for the workforce where using AI and getting comfortable working with AI is going to be the expectation. And so you've got to start to, if you're going to properly prepare them to enter the workforce, whatever they choose to do, I think that's going to be increasingly important. So I know just in terms of experimentation, Adnan, you've been playing around. You've written a book with your daughter. You've built some apps going into the app store. I was wondering if you could just just give us a quick sort of highlights of your experimentation, if you don't mind.
100%. So, Bob, we were talking about, you know, being a generalist. I love this book. I don't know if you know of this book, Range. Really, it's something that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of all the ideas and things that I have. Like I said, I've taught a variety of different subjects, done a lot of different things, and I'm really interested in width and depth in certain ways. So I tend to think about like the month of October last year was when before vibe coding was called vibe coding, that's when I jumped into doing that. And I created a variety of apps, everything from like a real estate app where it's a Zillow extension. You go to Zillow, you click the extension, and it'll give you, based on how much that house is for sale and what it would rent for, based on the rent Z estimate, it'll give you a profit margin, whether you're going to make profit on that or not. It'll give you a cap rate, an NOI, all of that right away, right? Like all of those different things, all those different statistics you can get right away. It took me a few hours to make that Chrome extension, right? So once I started doing those, I started like expanding. I created a tic-tac-toe game. I created a card game based on like, a show that my kids were watching with me at this time, and a variety of different things until, like I started looking into the health apps that I was really interested in. And I created two health apps. One is called NutriLabel, NutriLabel, and it's available on the App Store right now as of April 1st, not April Fool's joke, but as of April 1st. And it's you basically take a photo of a nutrition label and it'll give you a rating from 1 to 10 based on how healthy it is, 1 being least, 10 being most, based on Michael Pollan's philosophy of what a whole food is. And you can, it works pretty well. And I've had really good feedback on it. I've used it myself. I use it all the time when I'm shopping for groceries and everything. And, my wife started to use it, and other friends have started to use it as well. And it's just something that I needed to have happen to make. And it provided me with a specific use case for myself that I was able to implement. And not just do that, but actually see what it took. So it took me about 16 hours to create that app. It took me about 3 months to get it into the App Store, right? So going through those different things was really interesting. And also the same thing with the book that Zarmina and I wrote together, right? Like it was the process of like what it takes to get to that point. For 45 minutes, we started a conversation with ChatGPT to kind of talk us through what roles and responsibilities each one of us had. What ChatGPT would have, what I would have, what Zarmina would have in terms of editing and rewriting and creating and concepts and all of that stuff. And it was wild to be able to experiment with Zarmina and have her be introduced to advanced voice mode on ChatGPT. And to her, it wasn't magic. It was just Google Home 2.0, right? She's been talking to Google Home for eight years of her life already. And so being able to do that was not a big deal for her. And it was not magic, which it is for so many people that I introduce it to, especially adults. And again, for me, it's around that taking the action. Like, what does it take to create this? How do you make this? What are the steps involved? And what can I do as a person who's interested in so many different things. And if I want to take action, how long is it going to take me to get to the point where I can publish something and create something and make something that is going to impact some people in my life or the community around me?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And it's great that you got your young daughter so interested already. I think curiosity in some of these young kids, or most young kids, is going to pay dividends. And just being able to solve everyday sort of challenges or concerns, right? Like once you educate people on what AI can do, and you teach them how to design something responsibly, right, ethically, fairly, then it's like you can unleash them on some of these everyday challenges. Like what problem, now that you know what I can do, what problems would you solve? And as we've talked about before, you've got to balance, governance and responsibility and things with innovation, but you've got to be able to play both offense and defense, I guess, when it comes to AI, right?
I think a big part of that, and this is something you had brought up at the beginning, and we sort of put a pin in to come back to, but I think one of the key aspects is transparency. And so if you're going to be using AI for something and somebody doesn't know how much human input went into it, writing it is a good example, then you should be transparent about how and when you used AI. So I think that clears up a lot of things, and it leads to that ethical aspect as well. So you're not trying to fool somebody, with fake images and deep fakes. You're not trying to pass off somebody else's work as your own, but you say specifically how it was used. And yeah, Adnan and I, yeah, he's like over the top at how creative he is about all these things. But we've been going back and forth. We tried transcription tools, custom GPTs. We built websites. We've done images. We've done writing. We've done music. We've done videos, and then applying these things into different domains in our professional lives and to learn things and in our personal lives. And so it's been a lot of fun with that exploration side of things.
I think back to some of the advancements that IBM had. It was probably a decade or more ago. They had this whole Smarter Planet initiative, right? Intelligent, instrumented, interconnected, and with the advent of, or the confluence of big data and advanced computing power, cloud computing, and all this stuff, and it made all this stuff possible. But now that we have this kind of conversation, it's like Smarter Planet. That wasn't that smart at all. Like, look at what's coming. Like, it's just going to be insane.
And the pace of change is wild too. So when Zarmina and I were writing this book, we first thought of the idea of writing a graphic novel, right? So we were thinking about graphic novel. And so I started experimenting with 7 different graphic novel platforms. And they were all okay. Like it was going to put an investment, a lot of time, effort, money to create something of that nature. So we decided in doing this book instead. And now that, with ChatGPT advanced image creation, it is so much easier to get the character consistency to happen, which was not the case. And this just comes with the ChatGPT subscription, and you can get the character consistency to happen, which is really wild to see in that same prompt doing it. And this is what, 2 or 3 months later after we've just been experimenting with this, right? So in 2 or 3 months, that's come to this place. People keep saying like the pace of change is going to slow down. I don't know. Right now, it's just like we're going to wait a few months and see what happens and how quickly we're able to do a lot of these things. Even from October vibe coding back then to now, like the amount that cursor has changed. I was telling Brian this. I worked on 4 websites this weekend in 3 hours and was able to create much more professional looking websites than I was even 3 months ago in a lot more amount of time. And we worked on one together yesterday, and our AI Culture Shift website, and so you can take a look and see what we've done with that too.
Yeah, it is amazing, and I'm glad to see that we've gotten the the overlay of, or the embedded writing text within images has come along. It wasn't very long ago that I was trying to do that for my own logos or whatever, and it just couldn't get it right, no matter how many times I tried to prompt it and instruct it one character at a time next to each other, whatever. It just never worked. So it's good to see. I knew it was only a matter of time, but it was, to your point, Adnan, and it was faster than I thought it would evolve. So that was nice to see. So aside from picking up the book, any closing thoughts and words of wisdom for the audience?
Sure. I keep going back to play. Like, play with the stuff that you have available. The more you play, the more you understand the limitations. And even if you make mistakes as an adult, right? I think it's okay to make mistakes right now to see how far you can push something and what the limitations are. Because the more you do that, the more you'll be able to understand limitations of yourself, of the technology, of where it's headed, uh, the power of it, and play deeply. Like, not just, oh, I tried it and it didn't give me what I wanted, and like just invest some time into that. I think, again, this is not going anywhere. It's going to stay. So play intentionally, I guess, is is part of it, and make something and create something and share the process with your neighbor, your friend, and if you have older folks around who are interested in this and just don't have the time and patience for it. In the US, you can call 1-800-CHAT-GPT and have a conversation with advanced voice mode, right? So try that out and see how it goes. And if you want to stay connected with us, we have our website, aicultureship.org. We'd love to talk more and investigate more and see if we can collaborate and play together.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic advice. I agree. I think top down can feel like it's being pushed upon you, or it's something that's being done to you, when it's really the intent is that this is for you. It's for all of us to make us all more productive, efficient, effective in what we want to accomplish. To your point, Brian, about like making sure it still aligns to the mission of the organization. But I think it's also um, having that sort of central area. Maybe it's a collection of innovation catalysts like us, and the change agents, the champions that are really going to show people how it's done. They're going to do mentoring and reverse mentoring across the organization, build community within some of these larger organizations to show just what's possible and where the limitations are. And leadership, they're not, they can't be observers of all of this. They need the upskilling as well for their own, effectiveness, to understand how to measure the performance of and the progress of their teams, but also to recognize when there's real opportunity to take advantage of different forms of AI to the betterment of the team and the organization at large. So there's just there's no time like the present to jump in and get started. So thank you guys so much for spending so much time with me. Sorry we had a couple technical hiccups, but I'm glad you guys were able to hang on a little extra time, and it's been a fantastic conversation. Congrats again on the book, and I wish you guys the best of luck. We'll make sure to put all of the links that you mentioned in the show notes of the episode. Well, thanks everyone for listening. This concludes another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. We will see you next time.